Fab. Hey, witches, it's Sunday, and on Sundays we sass. So we are here. This recording, if you're catching the replay, welcome. If you're watching it on our YouTube, um, this is SASS Mass. We meet every Sunday. This is casual witchy chat. Think like witchy chat around a warm campfire, especially this time of year in the Northern Hemisphere when we're in autumn, even though I know some parts of the country it's still hot. But we talk about all things witchcraft and general shadow work questions. We do have our foundations program where we get a little bit deeper into those things. This is not scripted, there's no agenda. We just take questions and have conversation, and it's been epic for the last 3 years. Um, we ask that you use the raised hand, and we can do a handoff to keep the conversation going. Um, just because we start talking about one topic doesn't mean we have to stay there. We can move around. And if you want to weigh in, you can just type weigh in the chat, and we know you want to contribute to the current conversation. Yes, so the witch is participating today. I'll post the terms of engagement for you. And ta-da, let's get it going.
You did great, Maria. All straight from memory.
Thanks.
Like she said, we've been doing this for 3 years. And that's kind of like that. We've been doing this for 3 years. And it's amazing how much we have grown and evolved and changed. And like, I love how those who are involved kind of ebbs and flows with our lives and everything. And we have all of these like homecomings all the time and these like launchings into these like great adventures. And I love this and I love us and I love kind of what I'm feeling on our horizon. And I can't imagine a better group of witches to be doing this with. Uh, so, so there. I'm feeling super sentimental because, full moon is right around the corner. And yeah, very much feeling it. Hi, guys. What I'm doing, if you're new to SASS, this is me trying to get the conversation going. At any moment at all, anyone could be like, you know what, I kind of want to talk about something. Or, hey, I experienced something this week that I would like to info dump about, or like literally anything that you want. We had a great live this morning that was kind of pokey in wonderful ways. I have Rufio and Stella like right out here. Oh my gosh. I think I might need to bring them inside. Sorry, Kim. Rufio figured out that he can jump on top of the catio. So he jumps. He's a freaking goat, man. Anyway, so the live this morning, we were talking about um how when we make big drastic changes in our lives, and these big revelations or awarenesses that we get sometimes, and we make choices that are in alignment with this new awareness, or these, like, we're doing the big scary thing and then we actually do the thing. It takes a little while for uh, our systems to reorient for that, and for the life that we manifested with those changes to show up in our lives. And are we ready for that? Do we feel ready for that? And what does ready for that look like? Is kind of what I've been thinking about since our live, right? Does that vibe with anyone else? Or is it just me? Because I know that I have made some significant big like changes in my life. And I can now start feeling the the shift of that and feeling the bits that are freed because of the decision that I made or the decisions that I made. Does that make sense? And so that reading this morning was like, hey, what it might be time to just like start leaning into that instead of holding back or even looking into the ways that I'm still engaging with my life in alignment with an old thought pattern or an old belief system. Because that's what tower moments are about, right? Go ahead.
Hello everyone. For you, it's a morning. For me, it's evening. Not that it really matters. Uh, I relate with what you say a lot because I'm in a big phase of change. The place where I'm living, my relationship with my family, and the way that I'm learning to have neighbors simply. Um, my parents had neighbors. I didn't when I was living with them. And all that, what I'm trying to say is that we in this kind of change, we're active, we're participating to it, and we don't take the time to feel the change and be passive about it, and really accept the change that is happening around us and in us. And for me, it feels a bit like running and falling on the ground because we didn't take time to look at the ground simply. And that's over for me.
Completely agree with you. I was listening. I had to let Rufio and Stella in, but I was right there with you. Like, absolutely. And I think that this, the timing of all of these big changes, right? There, how many by show of like hearts have recently in the last like 2 months made a significant change, either um just like a significant change in your life that is in, again, alignment with where you're wanting to go. And yeah, right. All these big changes. So that it's important for us to remember to allow ourselves to feel these changes and to allow ourselves to process these emotions that come with this. And setting aside specific time to do that can be a really powerful practice. And when we talk in the guild about the inward turn, right? That there is a cycle to the way that we engage with our lives, and there's an ebb and a flow to the way that life is. And during the ebb, which is the introspective time, that's where we get to really things slow down enough for us to really sit with those feelings and sit with actually allowing ourselves to experience this big change. Like I don't know if I'm making any sense, but yeah, I'm totally right there with you. And trying to think about ways of supporting myself as I are giving myself more space or extra space to do that work in the coming months, since it's the time to kind of do that anyway for me. Right. I made myself a big fluffy bathrobe to do it. Like a dramatic collar. If I'm gonna be sad about it, I'm gonna be fabulous as I do it. Or something like that. Oh, look at those. How adorable.
I wanted to add too, I feel like for me, this particular season, it's not the big outwardly, like in the past where I've had a big tower moment, something has changed and then perpetuated like lots of other moving parts and changes. But this year, to me, it feels like massive internal shifts that I'm really feeling inside, but like my external environment hasn't like reflected it yet. So like it's like the beginnings of it, but it's a lot of just like really, really big perspective shifts. Um, and then with that perspective shifts, we'll see how my external environment, shifts. But that's what I'm really feeling this time around. So like if you weren't, if you wouldn't necessarily maybe notice unless we're having like a deep, convo, like a fireside chat and, kind of sharing. Um, and the one place where I do notice it is with my friend group, as I do have a group of friends that have known me for since childhood, and I realize sometimes they maybe expect me to react in a certain way, and I no longer do that, and I think that's interesting to be a part of, and also like it's interesting for me to have that reflection to know what I maybe used to be like or had perspective. So that's just what's happening for me. Thanks.
This whole coming back to Oregon thing for me, like I did a lot of growing when I moved up to Alaska. Like, in a lot of ways, the way that I engage with my life is significantly different. Uh, and so like I am really looking forward to and curious about engaging with people that I engaged with back then, and how that's different. There's definitely like this curiosity about that. Um, how long has it been? Like, has anyone else had an experience with that where they hung out with a bunch of people and then left and did a bunch of growth and change and came back? Right. Yeah, I'm curious. I'll definitely be journaling about it, probably creating content about it. Yeah. A lot of conversation happening in the chat today. Yeah, I like what Ocean said. Oh, hey, go ahead, Melanie.
Um, well, what's going on for me, which I think is maybe a little bit sort of tangentially related to what you're talking about, is um, I had to kind of, see if I can explain this properly. So I had a really rough, like, sort of summer because I just physically wasn't very well, and I just thought I was like, I just had this like shitty self talk where I was like, I'm just tired, I'm just not moving. Like I was just doing like a lot of like kind of beating up on myself about like what I wasn't doing to keep myself healthy in the way that like we're told we're supposed to. Um, my mother took one look at me and realized that I was actually ill, and I went to the doctor. And what that translated to, and the point that I'm getting to, was that like once I realized that like, okay, I'm really tired, but it's because like I need to like eat lentils because my iron is very low. Like I'm borderline anemic. But I sort of my relationship with like my life changed. So I'm like, okay, yes, I'm exhausted, but it's because I have this condition. So I'm not shitting on myself, so I'm not, like, double downing on myself, so I'm, like, still I'm getting more done even though I still feel like shit. So it's the same thing kind of with, like, way I approach, like, my isms, where it's like, okay, where it was, like, so important to, like, recognize and acknowledge being autistic as an adult, where it's like, no, it's not gonna make a huge impact on how I was when I grew up, but knowing that I'm having a hard time in a social situation because I'm sensory overloaded allows me to have a lot more grace with myself, and that's something else that I'm having a much easier time with is, like, it's like being a woman and like knowing that I'm like, okay, my anxiety is high and I'm having a migraine because I'm about to get my period. Does it change the fact? No, but I have a lot more grace with myself because I have an understanding of where I am physically. This is the point that I'm making. I'm sorry I went all the way around the bush, but I I have an understanding of where my body physically is and where I sort of am in like neurotypically, and it's allowing me a lot more grace for myself, and I'm finding that like I'm engaging with like my life better. That's where I am. Sorry, that took me a really long time to get out.
I definitely relate to that, Melanie, too. Like over this last summer, I learned that I had that like gene mutation that was influencing like everything and even like my ability to like process vitamins. And I was all like, and not that like a diagnosis or whatever changes it, but it's that grace, it's that understanding how to support my body better, but also, that it helps with that grace bit, man. It's amazing how much energy we invest in like being hard on ourselves and pushing ourselves. And then when we just like, oh, stop. Words are hard. Oh my gosh.
Well, it's the I'm not doing the thing because I'm lazy. It's the I'm not doing the thing because my body needs a nutrient and I can still function and I can function tired better now because I understand that I'm not lazy by the definition of the cappy pappy. I have the physical need that needs to be met. And that level of understanding about my physical body, which I wasn't allowing myself to have because I was so busy beating myself up because I wasn't meeting like my work requirements because it's the summer and sort but it's when I make all of my money for the year. But just that bit of like, no, I'm not I'm not lazy. My body has a physical need that's not being met. Like I'm like, and I'm ignoring it, and it's getting worse, not better. Like I'm not suddenly becoming lazier because I'm telling myself I'm lazy. No, I'm just getting sicker because I'm ignoring it. So that's that like that change in perspective.
can feel the questions. I know someone has things they want to talk about. I can feel it. So, offering just a little encouragement if maybe you haven't shared yet and it's your first time and you just have a burning question or topic, we're here for it. Carrie, okay. We're here for another hour and a half, so hopefully you'll get out of the store. Totally get it.
So I gotta flip it to a shadow side of this whole, like, uh especially on these like health journeys of understanding our physical body better, and I had like a pretty intense year last year with regards to that. I learned a lot about my physical body and my brain and different ways to support myself. But the flip side of that was that I also learned that when I started allowing myself accommodations, when I started having healthier boundaries about what I was expecting of my physical body, I really, really got to see the capacity of those around me, their capacity for grace as well, and how many people I had in my life that did not have the grace for themselves to allow healing and allow for rest, right? And recovery and those kinds of things. And that was hard, super hard. And yeah. Hi, Renee.
Hello.
I miss you.
I miss everybody too. I had some medical stuff, but I'm not going to talk about that. And then also I took like a social media break. Um, but I was going to say this fall, what I really feel um drawn to is mending. So, and it kind of got kicked off. I don't know, it just keeps coming up lately. And one of the things I like to do is buy Japanese craft books because their craft section is so wildly different than the American craft book section. But then also, just in case anybody is ever wondering, number one, they give awesome diagrams, but number two, you can just use Google Translate and just like point your phone at the book and it translates for you automatically. So that's pretty cool. But so I broke this dish that I keep my glass, like it's where I put my glasses, so I know where my glasses are, because if I don't know where my glasses are, I can't see to find my glasses. Like my eyesight's so bad, but I take them off all the time. But and I was like, I was so irritated. I'm like, oh, I don't want to throw this away. And then I was like, you know what? I'm gonna mend it. And I think it's called kintsugi. The when they mend with gold. And this is one of the things I love about living in the internet age, is that I could just go on any, there's so many sites you can go to where you can take like a $7 class on something amazing that, you know, you can use the rest of your life. So, and who doesn't want to mend their stuff with gold? I mean, that's super duper fun. But that's kind of my overall fall um feeling, I think, is like um you know just wanting to like make my environment more pleasant and get ready for winter, because um like all the things that you want to do outside, you know, like if you wanted to, you know, spray paint something, like I mean, it's too cold to do like outside things, you know. So and then I'd also stopped in my favorite like plant shop, and we were all talking about how we had to like hurry and repot our plants, like the countdown's on, you know. And when I have like living things that I'm taking care of, like I feel like intense responsibility for them, and I love houseplants. But anyway, that's just kind of my where I'm at right now. Um, yeah, and I miss everybody, and I hope I'm gonna get back on and try and catch up with what everybody has been up to, and I hope I get to read and hear about the convergence. But I know if not, not, you know. But yeah, so that's me. I'm gonna mute.
Okay, I'm gonna jump in. Oh, Lady Dynamite. Oh man. You want to go first? You can go first and I can put my hand up because this is completely like side questing. So I'll put my hand up.
So I just have to speak on what Renee said. I said yesterday in the sacred space, I'm not going to be on these lives because I'm not ready, but I have to. I have a special interest in Japanese art forms, not all of them, some of them. Kintsugi for me is one of the most beautiful art forms from Japan. The whole idea, if you don't know about kintsugi, is if you have something broken, typically it will be porcelain, plates, cups, whatever. You put it back together. Quite often you see it with gold, but other metals are being used. The reason you use the metals and preferably something that really highlights the bit that's been broken is that it's part of the history of that piece of pottery or whatever it is. I love how you highlight that just because you're broken doesn't mean you're not valuable anymore. So I just had to say that. I take my hand down again.
You're allowed to take up space for one. Two, I'm going to figure out how to lower my hand. Okay, so this is totally going on a completely different subject. We had a guild meeting last night, and as you guys can see, like my background has changed. And I am renovating the RV that I'm living in, right? And so far, all I've done is hung curtains and painted, and it's drastically different. And what my goal is to renovate the RV with things that are like meaningful. I want to do this in a way that I'm proud of, and using like reclaimed materials is kind of a part of that. And because of the story, and I think that it's interesting that this kind of ties back to the story thing, but I love the story behind reclaimed furniture especially. But what I was looking for on like online, like the local marketplace, was like a secretary desk in order to put my like monitor and everything in, because it needed to be really small. And I just happened to find this guy online, and he had a secretary desk, and he had made himself for his daughter, and she used the secretary desk for her entire like scholastic career, like from the time she was real little all the way through her like whatever. And he like got his messages confused and thought that he was talking to someone else, and he offered me um this dresser with a mirror, like this really, really old dresser with the mirror, thinking that I was a furniture salesperson, that I like resold antiques or whatever. And I was like, well, that's a cool dresser, but I don't like, anyway. So I went to go pick these things up, and this dresser behind me that has this like, look how cool that is. It's like giving Eye of Sauron. I like love it so much. But that's where the mirror goes. But it was his grandmother's dresser from when she was little. Like she grew up with this, and then he got it. And so it's like, I love everything about all of this. Of course, I painted everything black. I didn't tell him I was about to paint everything black, but I totally did. And what's really cool about this particular setup is that once I get the mirror, my book is up there right now. But once I get this set up, the secretary desk, do you guys know what a secretary desk is? It has like it closes up and then unfolds and then has like yeah. So my monitor and everything that has to do with the outside world, oh no, like outward connection it's inside this desk. So it's a portal to the outside world, and behind me the mirror is a portal to the inside world. My book is a portal to my inside world, and I love that they're like facing each other. And so yeah, cool, huh? I love it. I think it's great. And I have to like, the mirror's gonna go up there eventually, but it's so old that the little bracket that holds that in there rusted all the way through and fell off. So I need to repair it. Go ahead.
It's a lot of work that's waiting you, and it's gonna be a fun time, I think. And why I did the thing is to come back a little to what was said before, and speak a little bit about my brother. Not a lot, just to explain. He's in I don't know how to say it in English. He's in a place in Belgium for autistic people with difficulties with more than autism, and they have a story to present the facility. And the story speak of a woman who goes to get water to the well, and she has a pot or a jar. I don't know how the word in English, but I think you understand. It's some kind of recipient for the water she travel with, and she goes to the well, and she comes back from the well, and she sees that on the one side of the path there are flowers. I don't know if you heard some this story, if it's the kind of story that's told a bit everywhere. And the fact is that a part of the recipient is broken. And so there's water trickling from the recipient. And with each travel offer, the water goes on the earth on the side of the path. And it's thanks to the water, the flowers are here. And the moral or the ending of the story is bad. As you said, it's not because you're handicapped, you have an handicap. It's not because you have things you can't do that others can do that you're not valuable. And in the same way, it's not because you're less that you're not beautiful. Beauty isn't you don't buy beauty with money. So speaking of value for this kind of thing is for the very, very rich people who live in another world, I say.
I just want to say that is my favorite story. Favorite story. Hi, Virginie. Sorry, I'm not waiting on a moderator. I'm just gonna jump in. That's okay. 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 So, there's been a lot happening over the summer. Major, major life changes that like completely set me free from a whole lot of stuff, which is really important. So I'm like in a good place for the next phase of life to take place, right? And I've been just enjoying the kind of the freedom of movement and the freedom of my emotions and like reconnecting with the joy of life that I feel like I've been really disconnected from for a long time. And now I find myself jumping in a million different directions, ready to, right? Let's do this major life-changing thing or this major life-changing thing. Kind of like, whoa. Yes, Jean-Marie, yes.
Can you keep going with that? Like, I knew I wanted to talk on this, but you can keep going.
I'm trying to I'm struggling because I want to do the next big thing, but I don't actually know what the right thing to do is, right? Like I knew I knew I needed to open up life, and now I'm kind of struggling with things I thought were settled are suddenly not settled anymore. And so I'm rethinking it, but also realizing that any of the steps I make towards this major life change would sort of naturally constrict the freedom that I have now. So my tendencies are to like jump headfirst into things, and we'll sort out the consequences later, and things will work out, it'll be okay. But I really don't want to do that this time around. I want to like be a little more strategic and in control and sure that the things that I'm actually doing are in alignment as opposed to jumping off the deep end and you know but that's hard to do.
Oh yeah. Okay. Can I poke? Can I get all up in there? This is okay. This is so great. First of all, Good job doing the big scary thing and making the big choices. That is very hard. That's like, whew, that we often call that the danger rush, like that feeling that's really scary just before you do the thing, and then you do the thing and you're like, oh God, like this is so much like better. Like everything is so much better now that I've done this thing. But oh my God, now what do I do? Right. And unless you're in like a dangerous situation to where you have to make a decision right now, what I have learned is that when we need the information to make the decision, or it's there. When we need to make the decision, the information is there. That was hard. It's there. The hardest thing, because our brains were trained uh, by, institutionalized learning and everything, that our value is in our ability to. There's a big, big bug in my house. Get it, Rufio. Flying bugs have the upper hand, man. I don't care who you are. They're just okay. So we have been taught that we have to go, 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 and our value is in doing. And the hardest thing to do, besides like letting go of control, is allowing ourselves to be for a little bit. Right? Yeah. If you don't have to make a decision, if it isn't like, yeah, I gotta do this thing, just don't yet. Allow yourself the time, what Virginia was saying, allow yourself the time to recover and to reorient, so that when you do make this next, when you build this life, when you start on this foundation, you're doing it from a place that is solid, right? And you're not doing it out of survival mode, right? Because what you're doing is also kind of a trauma response, right? Survival mode. You don't have to always be in survival mode. And when we jump into the next thing and don't allow ourselves that recovery time, we are pushing our systems. We're adding another load where what we just gave ourselves was freedom for recovery, right? Yeah. And you're in foundations, right? Okay. So this month we're talking about boundaries, right? And this has to do with boundaries too. It's you are the advocate for your system, and you are the one that is deciding how much of a load, both physical, emotional, and mental load, you are putting on your system. And if you're taking on more than what you can responsibly manage, then you are going to put yourself into another like crash and burn. And that's not the life you want, right?
That's like exactly what has been going through my mind in the last like 48 hours. Oh my God. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. See, we're all tapped into we all have access to the same information. We all just are interpreting it through different lenses. Okay. So, through the next few months of foundations is going to give you the tools to answer that question by January. Okay, of like, what do we do, because that's like what's going on with the sun cycle. Foundations is in alignment with the natural cycle of the world, so you're just, and we are connected to that. And so it's gonna be okay. Okay, and you're doing a good job. It is fucking hard. It's hard, but like we're in this together. Go ahead, Maria.
Hi. Um, don't panic, it's organic from Ocean. That's great. I wanted to kind of speak on when you said, but I don't know what to do next. Like, I don't know what to do. And I maybe just wanted to first validate that that's okay and share for me how this has gone. Um, I was in survival mode for, I don't know, 30 years, maybe, give or take, something like that. Part of the survival mode was I always knew my next step, when I was going to do it, how I was going to do it. I was going to do it. Nothing was going to stop me. And I had like the information. So like my system was supporting my survival mode. Like I was getting to the next thing, accomplishing that, checking it off, but what's the next thing? And I want these initials after my name, this many, blah, blah, blah. I want to make this much money. That's what I thought I was supposed to do, right? To be a good person, citizen. That's what I thought, and that was part of my conditioning. And I wanted to get as far away from my childhood as possible, like from my traumatic, living with my immediate family. And I like wanted to get as far away from that. How do I do that? Like, how do I be successful, make other people proud of me? Um, all of those things, right? But always had like this deeper pull and like was always dipping my toe into the occult stuff too, right? And then that side of it. But my primary brain mode was survival mode. Okay. Enter Jen Marie my TikTok, stage left 2021. Now, I done therapy. So I had some tools in my tool belt for coping strategies. Learned how to cope. I'm an A plus coper. um, did went to therapy on and off over those 30 years and did that probably more, 35, but did that thing. Okay. Therapy was great, very helpful. Um, at one time had a really great psychiatrist slash therapist that helped me tremendously. But I was in crisis mode, like having panic attacks, like needing help with not wanting to feel that, that way or figure out what was going on with me. And that was important. Those moments in my life were highlighted. But the shadow work was the game changer that I've been looking for to actually make the big shifts and I actually feel different. Like that part of me, Maria, is still me, but I don't feel like I see pictures of myself and I'm like, oh, like I hold such compassion for that person because I'm not that person anymore. I'm really, truly not. And it was the shadow work that presentation of how shadow work for witches is done is what changed. The change that I was seeking but then got presented. Gemry was the first, and we had other witches in Bright and Dark at that time, and other people that helped, that made a really big difference. So, what I wanted to say, that's all a little bit of the background up till now. I stopped getting the pings of what I'm supposed to do next. Like completely stopped and I'm like, what is going on? This is so unfamiliar to me. I don't understand this. Like I always knew what I was going to do next. And now I don't. And I'm super stoked about it. Like it's great. It's freeing. And I'm not saying like this is going to be your path. I'm not saying this is just my path and know that there's some similarities with other people from people that have shared. And so that was different, a bit confusing. I was like, okay, like I'm so confident in this shadow work path with the people that I'm doing it with and just the shifts that were happening internally and how that was being reflected externally that I would say there's still a percentage of it that is like maybe there's a little bit that I'm holding on to, but it's just a little bit now. Um, and it was like, oh, I just sat with it. Like this is really interesting. I'm not, and I'm not getting the information about like, what's my next step? What's my next big thing? What am I working towards right now? And so it was a huge like practice in presence. And like I'm saying that you know, like all we have is the now moment and now I need to show up and live that way, right? Like and we're humans and having a human experience and so like not everything is it's not about like perfecting this process. It's just about living and engaging and like learning. Um and yeah, I think really my message, like the information is starting to fade now, is more just the validating that it's okay not to know what to do next and just to kind of be present. And like you said, Carrie, like making that choice from an authentic place, it does feel really different too to do it that way. Like what we're like used to feeling of like checking off the box and feeling it that way. So I'm just validating that like yes, like just keep going and you're awesome. And yeah, I hope that was helpful. I don't
It
if
is
I
because it's like weird and kind of scary, and I don't really, and it's uncomfortable, and I kind of don't know what to do with myself, except at the same time, it feels free. And then it's weird. I have to remind myself that this feels good. Like, what the heck is happening in my head?
yeah, and like just like awesome things have happened and I'm not like and I'm in more of that like trying to be authentic like making decisions from um yeah from like that place and so just to validate that like to give you maybe some data that you can let that other part go and awesome things are still going to happen. So like that's maybe really what I wanted to say too. Maybe most importantly you know is that so let me see. We got a lot. It's popping. We're popping off. Who is next? Let's see. Sorry. Sometimes as even though I have been doing this for 3 years, I still press wrong buttons. Stephanie. Stephanie.
Oh,
You're
thank
on mute. Oh, you're muted. Yes.
thank you. I thought I hit the button, but it hadn't come off. Thank you for that. Carrie, I resonated with what you said like so much. It's literally the way that I am wired. Like my whole life has been spent jumping without knowing why. Right? I don't know. My gut says to do this, go. And it has always worked out for me, even if it got a little sloppy, a little dusty. It has always worked out. Um, I brought it up a couple times recently. I got a human design reading that said, I'm literally wired that way. Like I'm literally physically built to do those sorts of things. And so when I first came in to this group and I was learning to respect those pauses, it is really uncomfortable. It's like so uncomfortable, and I didn't understand it, and I was always looking for something else. But here I learned to trust that pause, and that I've learned since that after those, dust ups, if you will, sometimes I need to wait for other things to align, right? Like things that I don't, may not even know about yet, um, to align and catch up, right? For those frequencies to align and mesh. And so if I honor that pause, that allows those things to happen. If I stay in those wild frequencies, it almost delays those connections for me. Uh, so um, I'm getting better at it. You know, it's still uncomfortable, but I'm definitely getting better at it. It's a constant practice. And journaling is my big thing, which I also didn't do prior to this being in Bright and Dark. But as I read back through my my journals, which I do daily, you know, for my entry from the year before or the year before, and I see this constant data that like this is okay, I'm going to be okay, just pause. And then when it's time and those things that are in alignment will present themselves at exactly the right time, I've got the data to show that that always happens. So I'm going to pass it on to Ezra. That's all I have to say.
This is a great discussion and I relate to a lot of it. It's what it's bringing up for me is like the importance of like somatic work when you have time to recover, because that is like that was a huge learning curve for me as well. Like once I kind of kept on with like my living situation for a while, was still in the mode of like, oh, where am I going to have to move to next because of my life, you know? And I'm like, oh, what's the next thing? What's the, like I was like Maria and Stephanie were saying, like both, like I was good at just doing that. Like I was just like, I can make whatever happens happen. Like, you know, like there on two separate occasions, I just like got rid of everything that didn't fit in my car and moved across the country and succeeded in the next place and like that kind of thing. Yes, it was like super stressful, but I was like, whatever is going to happen is going to happen. I'm going to make it. It's going to be fine. I'm really good at, you know, like getting jobs. Like anytime a job like ended or I got fired or it self-destructed in some other way, I always had another thing immediately, right? Like I could always figure that out. And I think when you're good at that, especially like when things had, you know, you didn't end up like good at it as in like, you know, you didn't end up homeless or in the hospital or something like that. Which, you know, doesn't like I have been homeless before too, but so not to say anything about that, but sometimes it's really hard to teach your system again how to slow down and how to settle in exactly where you are. And it can kind of be like you're addicted to the danger rush as well, a little. And that is your nervous system is just trying to cope with that. It's trying to say, like, oh, this is everything I've ever known. And so that's what feels safe is being up here and heightened. And then so it makes sense that as soon as you start to dip, you're like feeling uncomfortable and you're like, whoa, 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 what's going to happen next? Right. I better go ahead and make the move before the move's made on me type of thing. And the I can't recommend strongly enough doing nervous system work and, you know, somatic movement and breath work and all that stuff. I mentioned, I think it was in the sacred space too, but as I've, you know, been going more in the inward turn, I realized pretty recently when I was describing, oh yeah, I'm a nervous laugher. And then I tried to think of an example of my most recent nervous laugh like that was ended up being awkward, you know, because that happens, but and I couldn't think of one that had happened recently because I'm literally less nervous now. And I was literally just like thinking about it and being like, wow, I feel like a completely different person than before I was on my somatic journey. And that felt sometimes, even if it's a really good thing, and sometimes if you've had a really difficult, uh, you know, series of events in your life, sometimes good things feel especially untrustworthy. So that can be, you know, like that can even I had a talk once about like what I would do if I won the lottery. And I was just like, oh my God, I'd do so much nervous system work so that I wouldn't just like go crazy from like from suddenly having that much money and not knowing what to do with it. Because, you know, I don't know if you know about like research on lottery winners and stuff and how like so many of them end up like terribly in debt and stuff afterwards. But like it makes sense to me that if that, you know, type of windfall type happens, which if you made a huge leap in your life and now you have freedom that you never have, your nervous system probably is overwhelmed with all of the options that are now open to it. And that's feeling a little destabilizing because the walls that we put up, even if they were like imprisoning us, were pretty stable, right? We knew where they were, even if that was like making our choices narrow. And so I can't recommend that enough. I think that's it's like my, it's been a special interest of mine, and it's only becoming more of a special interest of mine. I'm just like going into more facets of somatic research, really, the more that I am embodied, because I've spent most of my time dissociated and was like, hey, body, I'm going to leap and you're going to catch up with me or you're not. And then, and that's it. So that, being wired that way too, like you're going to like Stephanie said, I think that there's absolutely people that are good at doing those things. And the more your nervous system regulates and your body starts to trust your world, the more you're going to be able to discern which part of that is you, so that you can make better intuitive choices, and which part of that is the trauma response, because they look very similar and feel very similar when when everything is like, wah, like up there in the nervous system response. So yeah, I think that's all I had to say. We had a similar discussion at the Convergence about like impulse versus intuition. So that was very topical. Thank you for bringing that up. That was awesome.
Thank you. I'm trying to get the notes down as fast as I can, so I can't remember it all. But so can you just repeat? You said something about the more the nervous system regulates, the more what?
The more you'll be able to discern which part of you is talking. Like, is it the part that just believes that everything's still in survival mode and that you have to do the next thing, or else if you stay still, something bad might happen? Or is it an actual intuitive nudge that's saying, hey, that's the next thing right there? Yeah. That actually reminded me of something else that I wanted to say. So thank you for asking that. Which is still the same thing. It was what Maria was talking about you can't about not knowing until it comes up, essentially. That's a huge thing. And that's something that I'm still like, my brain wants to know. And that is something that is internal to me. I'm a knower and a reader, and like the clair cognizance stuff and everything. Like I'm always doing that. And I know that there is part of me that is just a knower, right? But then there's also the part of me that wants to know out of survival. Like if I know what's coming next, I'll be able to do this. I'll know if I'm doing things wrong, etc. And even just recently, I've been writing a story, and I keep on coming to like stalls where I'm like, I don't know what happens next in the story. And then I start to feel like, oh no, it's another unfinished story. Oh no, I'm failing at writing the story, blah, blah, blah. And then a literal like life event will happen. I will have a conversation. I'll get, stuck in traffic one day and see something and be like, oh, that's it. And then I'll be able to get to the next part of the story. And then like I literally was describing the story to Ocean the other day, to the point where I had gathered the information. And I was like, I literally couldn't know this because this only happened yesterday. So of course I couldn't write the whole story last year when I originally had the idea. Like so it feels like, it's just like that's the exact kind of like breadcrumb thing. Like you can't have the entire piece of bread. Like it's all the breadcrumbs. And my brain, but then my knower, and then like combined with my survival instinct, wants to have the whole piece of bread, at least to see the whole piece of bread for a little bit to make sure that it's there. And I'm not just following like random breadcrumbs. But the more that you do the somatic work, the more you'll trust yourself too. And so that's a huge learning curve, but it helps so much when you have a somatic practice. So thank you. I think Jen Marie is next. Yeah.
I love this topic so much.
One of the other facets of foundations, especially the practical application exercises in the workbooks, help you guys to start this discernment process that Ezra's talking about. Because most of the time, when you're coming from like a mainstream experience, your internal environment is like a room filled with people that are all arguing about what should be done or what's going on, and it's just static and chaos inside all of the time, right? And most of our time is spent trying to quiet that and to try and ignore it and to try and push whatever it is, all this stuff away. And the process of kind of shadow work for witches and this somatic work that Silver's talking about too is actually allowing each one of those people in the room a seat at the table to talk to you about what's going on. You're actually letting your awareness, you're shining the light of your awareness on one of those voices so that you can understand them, so they're no longer yelling and trying to get your attention about something. And it's just like allowing one at a time, a place at the table. And then eventually what ends up happening is, you know, the sound of your own voice, you know, the sound of the voice of your body, you know, the sound of your, like, the guides, you know what they feel like and sound like because you've actually sat and had a conversation with them, right? You know the difference between a physical sensation, an energetic reading, and like an emotion, because most of the time we're not taught these things. And so we put it in the bucket of anxiety or depression and stuff it and try to move on with it. But yeah. Go ahead, Silver.
That it's like a tangentially related, but I kind of felt called to like give an example of the discernment versus, for me, my judgment is a big like player. Like I used to consider my judgment like a like my fatal flaw or something like that. And then I went through a period of like, I guess I'm just a judgy person. That's part of my thing, right? Like, and it's like most of the characters that I've ever loved are are like judge complex people even. And as I've been working with my judgment over the past like 6 months or something like that, very intimately, and getting to know why I'm judging things and the difference between judgment and discernment. One of the things that came up was my judgment doesn't want to lose its job. Like, it's like if I were to think about that as like a whole person and like that's the judge, right? And I'm saying, actually, I don't want to judge things anymore, then that part of my brain is going to freak out. Like it's going to be like, are you killing me? Like I don't have a job anymore. I'm like going to, I'm not going to be able to do the thing that I've done like literally for my entire life. Like this is what I'm good at, blah, blah, blah. And so that's when a part of my brain panics, is like, and doesn't want to heal that. Like even if my judgment is making me miserable in some way, it is saying, no, but I need to keep my job, right? And so my method has been to use nonviolent communication to get down to that need, and then give judgment a new job. And judgment's new job is discernment, and which is very similar. It's just like, and I think the way that I've seen and that resonates with me as like the difference is, so like observation without judgment is, like that's an avocado and that's banana. Like, that kind of thing. like rather than I fucking hate avocados or I fucking hate bananas or I love them, right? Or bananas are good and avocados are bad, right? Those are the judgments you're assigning, like, morality or inherent goodness to one or the other. And the discernment is just differentiating. And so the more nuance that I get with as my judgment learns its new job better as discernment, I'm able to go to, instead of like looking at what someone else is doing and saying like, oh, I feel like that should be my job, like, or I don't like the fact that job exists at all, or whatever it is. Instead, my discernment is able to say, oh, I can see what parts of me resonate with that specific thing and the parts that don't. And so like if I were going to participate in that, I would do it in this way. Like, I feel like that's getting a little bit vague, but hopefully it resonates with you or anybody.
No, this
Go ahead.
resonates for me in like a huge way. The thing I've been struggling with is not so much judgment, but um jump to anger and rage even in cases like I think my instincts are to like classify it as I'm happy about this thing or I'm really pissed off about this thing. And it's not, there's a lot tied up in there, a lot of emotions that need to be processed. But this is this is giving me something that I need to like ponder, to try to figure out what am I gonna what's behind the rage and what am I gonna do with that, because it's like a motivator, right? It like gets me to go do stuff. Um, but it's not always productive anymore. So thank you. Thank you.
Jenny, you're up next.
And what Ezra said resonate with me in the way I really love to read. I have loved to read. It's really love. Since I was a child, I was hiding and in my bed reading when I was supposed to sleep and all those things. And a few years ago, I started to realize that some stories, some books about how the people thinks, how they would act in some kind of situations, or how they end up in this kind of situations, and I see myself thinking, but I don't understand because I wouldn't be doing that. And for me, it's not like it seems crazy. It doesn't seem crazy, but it's just not my way of thinking, not my way of acting. And so those kind of stories, they're still fun to read, but it's not exactly the same. And so I found myself searching for another kind of stories with people who are more choosing the way they want to live and less bearing what happens to them and reacting to it. And I found that this difference was very interesting because reading it's basically what built my imaginary and all of it. So it's a big impact for me.
Thank you. The just kind of the part about the processing of the emotions and what Jen Marie kind of said about like how we're kind of moving through the seasons. And so it was more just a ping to that it's like can seem when you when information is revealed to you and then you have kind of this maybe scaled out back picture of things, but it is only we can only do the next thing like in this moment or what's like right in front of us. And that's just kind of how I when I start to maybe feel and go into some of the old programming of like I have to do all of this and that needed to happen yesterday. Like now that I've seen. And so and then shifting from that perspective to um all of it like, working like the somatic exercises will help definitely. And it's just I can only process the emotion that I'm experiencing right now in this now moment that's right in front of me. Um, and then that's just something that has helped as when we're getting that feeling of like wanting to do it all right now is to just take like what is here. Like even after this meeting, you could even sit like what emotions are coming, coming up. And so just processing them as they present themselves. And yeah, that's all. Petra.
Just like, what am I doing? I just wanted to add kind of just to what everyone was saying, just about the somatics piece and the and kind of the discussion, just if anybody is like interested, because this is my special interest. Like trauma and inner work and all that kind of stuff is so when we're talking about parts, that generally falls under like parts work or IFS. Like a lot of people have kind of like spoken around this but aren't using like specifically that terminology. That is one framework. Like parts work is kind of a more generalized framework. IFS is kind of where some of that parts work comes from. There are also other modalities that like use parts language. So if you're like looking for like, how do I do this? I like IFS in terms of like, it's very structured. And so when it talks about like engaging with parts and like when you have a protective part that's like has a job, um, whether it's a managerial part that kind of like say like an inner critic or something like that, that does things all the time and kind of is just always on, or it's like a firefighter part, like when some big emotion is kicked up, then you start binge eating or you start like shopping or you whatever it is, like that kind of more reactive versus like the managerial parts are more like day-to-day stuff. That I found that framework can help depending on like how someone's trauma is organized, just because there are some caveats about like when you're doing like inner child work, if it hasn't worked and like someone, or you try to do an inner child meditation and you're like, this is nothing, or worse, like things get worse afterwards, or like, how did this make it worse? Sometimes that might be because you have protective parts that are like, hey, you didn't ask permission to like get in this with this like tiny little part that I've had this whole job of keeping safe for my entire little like existence. So those are just some things where it's like it's not like one second, I just have to cough really loud. It's not like a hard and fast thing. I just find that it's the most like structured. So it's a nice model to kind of like, okay, these are some of the potential rules. And if I've bumped into these things, then I will at least know like, oh, this is why like that inner child meditation thing actually just like made me more triggered, or I like got really like, I got, I had a lot of trouble like not, drinking the next week or whatever whatever the firefighter that gets kicked off by like that, those parts kind of getting out of sorts. And the other thing about that is to understand that like structural dissociation, which is essentially the like psychological term for like having parts. Although like the idea that we have a mono mind, I find is like quite laughable. If you really look at like most things, it's like you're not one thing, we're many things at most points in time. I think most people can kind of like acknowledge that, but from a trauma perspective, structural dissociation like just can have some finicky bits, I should say. Like, so that's why I like just kind of engaging with IFS and kind of being like, how do I do this in a way that like makes sure that I don't like dysregulate myself further. The other thing that there's a IFS somatics book that's really cool from, last name is McDonald, I think, or McDonald, something like that, Susan. Or like just searching like somatics and IFS can be really helpful, because that can kind of help you do the like part somatics piece of like, where is the sensation and that kind of stuff. The other things that we kind of have been talking about, sorry, so what is that? That feels important to say here is that like the word that we're kind of talking about in terms of like building more regulation is capacity. So that is essentially like if your capacity in your body is full of, this is a metaphor, like an image from Irene Lyon, and her stuff is, a ton of her stuff is free on YouTube. And I learned this in her course. So like that course, although it is like, I don't know, it's like thousands of dollars or something like that, it's like $2,000, I think, but you pay it over a year, is definitely worth it if you have the finances to invest in it. It's something that I've like really, really benefited from, and is available for support like twice a year for like 3 to 4 months. So those are really cool containers to like look at if you have the funds. And then you get like lifetime access, and then there's like message boards and support, all this kind of stuff. Anyway, the piece about like, you basically have a swimming pool, and if your swimming pool is full of unprocessed traumas, like and sensations and other things that are stuck, it's full of like volleyballs or like beach balls or whatever, the quickest way that you can build your capacity is to not put any more balls in the pool. So that essentially means that like when we encounter something where like something as little as like peeing when you need to pee, eating when you need to eat, like tracking your body sensations and being responsive to your nervous system builds pardon my French, but a fuckload of like capacity, because your body's like, oh, you're listening. Like, okay, that's cool. And so that's like a really simple thing. Or like when you stub your toe, stopping, holding the foot, letting yourself cry or whatever needs to come out, like feeling the things in the moment, just not putting more stuff in the thing, can actually be the easy, like it seems literally, you're like, this can't be this easy. But like in the first year that I did somatics work, I had no capacity to do anything extra. I had no capacity, like my body was so dysregulated. That was all I could do, was like not put more things in, was like when my dog scratch my foot, stop, sit down, bawl, let myself cry, do the thing. And it was bananas, like how much capacity I built by like doing something so simple, and by like eating when I need to eat and peeing when I need to pee, and like going to sleep when I was tired, having that, like just listening to your body and responding to these very basic bodily cues. So I wanted to say that piece, because I feel like sometimes this stuff can feel really like intellectual and really like big, and like, how do I even start? It's like, literally you could start today by like going pee when you need to go pee. Like, that's it. Like, that's all you gotta do. Like, that's really like really basic. And I also wanted to say that like, that listening to your body is also the thing that like builds that like intuitive awareness as well. So, like when that like responding to those cues is the thing that will help you be like, oh, like I'm actually not as upset about this. I'm actually just really hungry. Like this emotion is bigger because I'm dysregulated, because I have ignored this hunger cue, and like things like that. And that can, I think it is pretty common understanding in the world that it's like, if you're dealing with like trauma, the thing that makes that makes things easier, or like brings more ease. I like that. To the situation is like, if you can stretch the time between stimulus and response, right? So if you get activated by something, if you can slow it down, and that often requires like building that like more awareness and being more responsive to your nervous system and having the capacity to do so. So like being able to not be dysregulated at baseline because you're hungry and thirsty and tired and you just need a hug. Like, you know, if you can attend to those like pretty basic human needs, and that acronym is HALT also, and that comes from like addictions work that I did. It's like, that's a pretty basic way to kind of be like, oh, like I'm having a hard time. Have any of these things been kicked off? Like, am I hungry? Am I tired? Am I lonely? I'm hungry. Was it hungry? I can't remember. Anyway, if you look it up, it's on the internet. Yeah, exactly. And expanding your window of tolerance. And this stuff all comes slowly. And I think that that's always the piece that is the most frustrating, because that urgency to be like different, to be like, I gotta change this, that is also trauma, is like usually is like, and it's also white supremacy culture. Often that's very much normalized in our society, is that like everything has to happen immediately. Like, why isn't it already done? And for most of human history, like the only times we had to deal with urgency was like in hunting animals or trying to get away from something for our lives. Like, and we are a society that is reliant on like draining people's adrenalines and like pumping them full of cortisol just to make them do stuff that they really don't have the capacity to do. So I think that I just say that to like normalize that like this society is not built for this work, but that does not mean that this work isn't important. And it doesn't mean that it's not feasible. It just is something that will happen more slowly than you want. And then also, I've been at this since like concerted somatic work since like September 2022. So like 2 years. And then like more kind of like just being awake and aware in my own life for 3 years. And if you had told me 3 years ago that I would be thinking about have the capacity to do, hold space, all the things that I'm doing now, I would have been like, no, like I can't even imagine how I would get there. And so I say that to be like, time is fast and slow at the same time. So you will do these things at the beginning and it will feel like nothing has happened. And you're like, why is nothing different? And then someday in the future, you'll wake up and be like, holy crap, I'm like so different. How did that happen to me? And you'll be like, oh wait, like they were right. The small slow stuff actually really did something. Like I didn't really, all right. So I just wanted to share that because it can be really like, honestly, the beginning can be so infuriating. And the last piece, and then I will hand it over to Isabel, is I think that's who's next. Is to just say that like anger is a very important emotion, and in society is very often vilified, is the emotion of change, is the emotion of action, is the emotion of boundaries, and it is life force energy. If you look into traditional Chinese medicine, anger is processed by the kidneys and it is part of our life force. Like that is where our life force energy resides and flows from. And so there are lots of times where in this society people get robbed of their life force, of their like vitality, because they are, especially if you are like have been conditioned to perform femininity under patriarchy, you know, good girls aren't angry, you need to be polite, be kind, be good, be sweet, be whatever. Well, I missed that lesson somewhere. I'm gonna be very, very honest. I've been an angry little girl for a really long time, because I knew things were wrong and I wasn't really afraid to say anything about it. When I say I was ferally autistic as a child, I was completely feral and completely autistic, and I just did things and there were no parents around to tell me not to do that. That was the one benefit of neglect. I was like, meh, like I'm just gonna go do it. No one's gonna tell me not to because they're not fucking here. And so what I will say about anger is that like there are many times for me where my anger has hidden emotions that are more difficult for me to process, like deep grief or sadness or terror. It feels much easier. I feel much stronger when I am mad. And so that has been my work. And I just share that because, you know, sometimes people are like, I don't even know how to be angry. They're like, Petra, how do you do this? Like, can you teach me this? And I'm like, well, you get to be sad. And I'm learning this as an adult. Like, I did not know how to be sad. I had to learn how to, I didn't feel embodied terror until like February 2022. Like I wasn't brave before, team. I was just numb. I was like, I didn't do things because I was like, huzzah, I'm brave. I was like, I didn't feel terror. I didn't feel fear. I didn't know what it felt like. I couldn't connect to it. So I think that I see these caveats of like, we all have these, I think, really nuanced relationships with our own emotions and our own systems. And so I think that it's important when like one emotion is primary, it like is always coming forward, is again, like getting curious with that, but also not shaming or vilifying it, and like understanding that like that anger really does love you. It probably is there for a reason. And that can be really hard in a society that shames us for anger. So I feel like that point feels really important, because it's like we get so many messages like, don't do this. And it's like, yeah, of course, in a society that wants to take advantage of you and like use you as a resource, your anger is deeply inconvenient because it will protect you. So I will hand this over to as well. Thanks, team.
Thank you, Petra. I am so happy for these meetings being recorded because there's just a lot of good information being given today. But Carrie, there was a thing that you said when you last spoke that stuck with me, and it was that you knew that you had to get out. I hope I'm not, I hope I'm saying this right, but something about you knowing that you can't be in this place of anger, which is also converted into rage, something like that. And not long ago, I was in a meeting with some of you all here, and I've been disclosing of this traumatic thing that's happened to me, and not until, yeah, bright and dark, that I've been doing the other part that therapy hadn't connected with me, but the shadow work here did. And now I was given this so much anger that I didn't know what to do with it. It was consuming me. I just didn't know what to do because there was so much anger and hatred for this person. But Jean Marie told me something that I know this. I mean, I've known this all my life, but it just didn't connect with my common sense because I was, I guess, in so much rage that I couldn't see past my own problem. And it's that I can turn that same anger. I mean, that anger itself is not a bad thing. It's what you do with that. And I remembered then that every time I get these, yeah, memories or flashbacks, or I have to hear my daughter talk about her healing, that I'm triggered again. And like, I won't lie, the anger didn't go away, but it's now how I'm responding to it. And I've chosen to make it a good thing. And now I know that at the beginning it looked sloppy for me because when I was very angry, I decided, okay, let me go for a quick run. But I realized that all the mechanisms that I've been using through my life is an escape to mask what it was hurting. And now I need to stop, sit down and face it and work through it. And I realized that I was doing that with a lot of the shadow works. Like I'd do the shadow work for a month and okay, go on to the next month. But maybe sometimes there were months where I thought like, oh, I left unfinished business and I'm moving on to something else. However, that unfinished business has to be faced. If I know that there is unfinished business, if I don't come back to it, am I really resolving it or am I just moving on? Which was happening with, has nothing to do with this, but a book that I'm reading, a Dostoevsky book. I love this book. I read it and I read it and when I'm done with this book, I have no idea what they said. So because I was just reading it at the moment without realizing the message. And I thought it symbolized a lot of my life, in the sense that I was moving through problems, maybe facing it, but then moving on. And I needed to stop, listen, and really listen to my system. If I am angry, maybe I have to find better ways. And I'm slowly coming into a space of realizing what is a good way of pouring my anger onto, or how do I disciple this anger without being destructive to my own system. So I don't know if it helps at all, but those simple words Jean-Marie told me get me every time. In the moments when I'm the most angry, I will come back and say, like, okay, it's okay, live the problem, live the anger, but what are you going to do with it now? Because locking myself in a room and crying hasn't helped yet. So stop doing it because it's not working. But so that's my 2 cents. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that. Thank you. Anger is a hard one.
Is it Ezra or Ocean?
I think
Ocean.
it's me.
Ezra. Ezra. Yes.
Okay, there we go. Decided
Hello.
to scoot like I accidentally swiped and suddenly I was on like the speak now thing. It's like, how do I get it back? Anyway, this has been an awesome conversation. I really resonate with what everybody has said. And yeah, even it's so funny, like the going to the bathroom as soon as you need to go to the bathroom thing, it seems so small. You're like, yeah, that's what you're supposed to do. But if you're like, as soon as I started implementing that, I realized how annoyed I would get with my body for needing to go to the bathroom, like in the middle of things, or I just got comfortable or whatever. Like, like I realized how I was treating my needs, even that like little tiny one, right? And so that's a big one. And so like, imagine the annoyance you might internally have toward your bigger needs, essentially. Yeah, so the what also came up for me when Petra was talking about like parts work or internal family systems. Something that I've also been doing as I'm becoming more intimate with tarot and like the archetypes in stories is like applying parts of myself to the tarot, and that could be an internal thing, but also it helps me understand my external world sometimes to apply the archetypes to people in my life that I'm interacting with. At least the way that my brain works is storifying, but storyifying. And most people that I have spoken to do resonate with that to some extent. And I've noticed that when like I'll draw connections to like, oh, I wonder why that person who like just kind of randomly showed up in my life, they're just like an acquaintance, something like that. I wonder why they bothered me so much. And I will kind of do shadow work on that on that person, right? And I'll be like, oh, it's because they reminded my system in some way of this archetype, whether it is like a boss archetype or an authority figure. I must say authority figure is one of my big ones, but in general, like sometimes it could be, they could remind you of the fool, or you're in, like you're maybe, which could be correlated to like your inner child. It could also have some like ableism stuff there with like, oh, I feel like that person is stupid. And then you can even draw that line back to your internal world of in what ways am I kind of like ostracizing myself because I think I'm behaving stupidly or am stupid? And I find that very good as like as a book nerd person, that I understand like the story structure of things. And so when it comes to me doing shadow work, or you know, light work as well, like it helps me kind of get straight to the point a little bit faster, because I don't take it as personally. Instead, I'm kind of like seeing them as archetypes, and like me as the reader of my own existence and my experience type of thing. Which makes it a little bit easier to like zoom out and go to a different perspective than maybe the like, this person is like a personal threat or to my like worldview, or even, you know, my actual like existence. um yeah, so I think that's all I wanted to say, but I just really love that, especially since we do so much tarot work and stuff like that. So go ahead, Ocean. And thank you, Carrie.
Thank you. I really love this conversation. This has been such a great sass. I wanted to weigh in on the anger, which has been something I've been developing a relationship with. And when I first started doing shadow work, and especially started doing like feelings work and stuff, and like the shutter exercise and all that, I'd had this idea that I needed to let all my feelings pass peacefully, and like it was supposed to be like a calm sort of work, and like the point was to like turn all my emotions into like not them. But the more that I've started developing a relationship, especially with my anger, it's made me think of how we can alchemize emotions, especially ones that are more difficult to deal with. And we can get creative about the ways that we do that. I actually had, and I'm feeling the pull to do this again sometime. And I'm probably going to go scream with another witch on a mountain soon, and maybe incorporate this too. But we talked about it in sacred space. That's why I'm laughing about it. But so uh I had a mentor one time suggest to me that I take a couple of pumpkins out onto like a dirt road, or like out in the forest, or out in like a naturey area, and just absolutely like mash them with a bat, like literally take all of my rage out on these pumpkins, because then they're actually really good for the animals around. They can like eat them and stuff. And so you're like literally taking your rage and pain and anger, and you're nourishing like the environment around you. And I would even say now to go as far as like using the shutter exercise to embody that anger more fully, and allow it to flow out through, you know, whatever weapon you're using, like a bat or tennis racket, or whatever. She actually suggested a tennis racket one time, but I ended up using a bat, I believe. And or an axe, even. You can like get real, you know, murdery with it if you want to. If you like, you know, if you really need to feel that way, then like that's fine. But like um as witches, when we alchemize our feelings, it can create waves in the environments around us, I guess, is my thought. And so that is my thought. Go ahead, Carrie.
Ocean, that's amazing. I love it so much. I don't often think about the alchemizing of the emotions except in the like process of getting it to leave my body, but the um like unintended consequence of nourishing the environment or creating waves, I love it. I love it so much. It makes the whole process feel I don't know. There's always a weird thing that comes with like you got angry and so there's a failure on your part, right? Because you became angry and then you have to process all of this and it feels really, really uncomfortable. But to think that that has like a direct positive impact on your environment is beautiful. Like it's really, really beautiful. That's a key that's gonna help activate my heart in like really great ways. Thank you for sharing that.
I'm so happy that resonated with you. Thank you so much. I just since nobody's hopping on, I'm gonna hop back on and say that I'm in like a phase right now where I'm kind of like in a cocoon and I'm like uh dissolving essentially. And so like I'm like going through this really big transformational period, and the ways in which my uh sorry, I'm losing my train of thought. The ways in which I impact the environment around me, like the ways in which I can alchemize things, has all become uh like the more you can make it into one motion of like what do you actually want your impact to be, and then everything that you experience is leading towards that impact. If you can see it as like for the intention that you're setting, then it's it's almost like a psychology trick too, because like we talk about manifesting as if it's something that's not as grounded in psychology as it actually is. But when you're making decisions towards something, and you're like, that's why we do like such deep belief work, like with the shadow work. Each time you make a decision, or like each time you set an intention, the decisions that you make are going to accumulate in some way towards that intention. And so if you're believing like I'm going to hurt someone, or like my anger is going to hurt someone, or like something, like there's this like automatic or like socially conditioned, right, belief that we're working towards, and that's why like the embodiment of feminine rage is so important, because we are like nurturers, we are creative people, and like we have such deep creative power that comes from our wombs. And so like if you can ask like how can I be creative with this, what can I create with this, it can change like your whole perspective on that, or at least it did for me.
Go ahead, Carrie. Is any final weigh-ins before we wrap it up?
Just thank you to everybody. This has been absolutely incredible. I love you all so much. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for bringing that up. It was a great like conversation, and I think it was fantastic. So thank you for sparking that. Um, so yeah, we have 5 minutes left. I just wanted to remind anyone in foundations or the guild that on the 15th, we do our foundations dedication meeting. So if you're needing a foundations dedication candle and you want to do that in a community, that we do that on the 15th. So that's on Tuesday. And that we have our spellcraft, which is focused on our boundaries. And, part of that is the release that we get to do in Circle and our spellcraft, which is on the 21st. And Alicia will be facilitating that spellcraft. We continue to have SASS every Sunday. Yeah, there's a lot going on, like astrologically, and yeah. So stay in touch on the app in our chats. And does anyone else have any announcements? Yay, Ocean. Karen?
Wasn't Ocean first?
Ocean just popped something in the chat about making a new dedication candle.
Oh, okay. I wanted to say thank you. When I started, Jen Marie was doing what sounded like a thank you for the community. And so I'm going to end with one. All of the work that I've done since I've started around February has kind of culminated. I'm sure it's not the end, but like culminated into a very big event where I have to face my fears, face my family in a vulnerable place, where in the past it would be awful and I'd be in a terrible, terrible place. And now I'm in okay, I get it. And this is going to be good for me somehow. And I'm going to face it with openness and transparency and honesty and boundaries. I'm not going to let them bully me or blame me. And it feels super scary, but also potential to be really powerful. And I've been kind of down for the last week and a half as I was struggling with facing it and trying to understand, like trying to put into everything that I've learned into practice. And I'm finally at a place where, okay, it's time. I'm ready. So I just wanted to say thank you because of the program itself, which I know was put in my path at the right spot, and the work that I've done, and this community, and the fact that you all are here. It really makes it more possible and faster. So thank you.
Thank you, Karen. Thank you, everyone. That is it for today, and we'll see you next time. Goodbye. Till next time.